Hey guys, and welcome to Carrier Battles 4 Guadalcanal with me, Time and Tactics. This game was sent to me by the publisher Avalon Digital. Thank you very much for that. And it's a war game set in, well, during World War II in 1942 1943, immediately following Pearl Harbor between the United States and the Imperial Japanese Navy. Let's go ahead and check it out. It's an old school game, so just be warned. You can play it on PC, that's what I'm doing. You can play it on iOS and on Android as well, so it's mobile enabled. Don't be fooled though, this is a deep game. The cool thing about it is that you can jump in and play it pretty much right away, and then you can learn about it as you go. And in this scenario, in this case, I'm going to play the Wake scenario, I thought. There is a naval search in the first battle tutorial, and there is a pretty good manual as well. We'll take a look at that later when I'm looking for information. I'm sure I will. So anyway, let's check out Wake. That's this one here. That is December 11th to December 24th, 1941 in the Pacific, right? A few days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese are invading Wake Island. Wake is strategically located and appeared to be more difficult to grab than expected by the Japanese. The Imperial Japanese Navy detached carriers on their way back from Pearl Harbor, whereas the Pacific Fleet, the U.S., is trying to send a relief task force along with a raiding carrier task force against Japanese positions in the Marshall Islands. This could have been the very first carrier battle of the war. Okay, let's go ahead and check it out, and we just get into it as we play. So I'm going to play as the U.S. here. You can do random or Japanese. And there we go. Here's the scenario information. And we read that first portion, right? Let's take a look at the screen now. There's some information here. Japanese Task Force 4X cannot move before day 3. We'll get into that. It represents various types of boats operating in the Marshall Islands and are easy prey for U.S. carriers. The VP awarded for transport losses is higher than usual. Okay? And here, victory information. Search and raid Japanese merchant shipping near Wochi and Kwajalein. Reinforce Wake and protect it from Japanese attempts of invasion. We'll look at the victory conditions when we get into it. This scenario here is for 3 days until 7 o'clock at night, 7:40 p.m. The sequence of the day is, well, we'll get into that. Basically, you have a day cycle and a night cycle, and then a little bit in between with dawn. Anyway, we can go to the map. But before we do that, let's go check out that's this one here, scenario info. We can look at the historical notes. Let's do that, since I am a little bit rusty. The first Japanese attempt was rejected to sea with loss of 2 DD, which would be destroyers, to coastal defense and aviation. So I guess they tried to take Wake and they were repelled by coastal defense on the island itself and aviation assets. The Japanese had to muster a much larger invasion force backed by cruisers and 2 aircraft carriers, CVs, to succeed. On the U.S. side, Task Force 14 carried supplies, troops, and aviation replacement for Wake. We'll see that in the game. Task Force 11, on the other hand, was to raid the Marshall Islands as a diversion. And we look at that as well. Historically, Task Force 14 was slowed by refueling in storm. Task Force 11 was finally diverted to Wake to help support Task Force 14. Both task forces were recalled once Wake surrendered. Well, historically they surrendered, right? Main point of deviation from original timeline. So here's where we have made some concession in the game. Saratoga, ships I guess, and Tangier sail earlier and have a chance to see action before the capture of the island. A note for all scenarios, the U.S. naval setup sticks to history, okay? The Japanese ship setup is historical, but the task force positions may vary. The scenarios often cover operations spread over 1 to 2 weeks, but the game duration had to be reduced to a few days. Okay, that sounds good, right? Now let's see, what else do we have here? That's historical notes. We have chosen options. We don't really have anything here. You can have options in various scenarios, but we're playing the vanilla Wake scenario. Okay, should we go to the map and take a look at it? Let's do that. So here's the map, and you can just drag it around like this. You can zoom in and zoom out. So we're looking at that specific, here's the Marshall Islands, this area right here, I guess. And we can see a few airfields over here. There's a task force over there. We can drag up here. Here's Wake Island. And here are a couple more task forces of ours. And this is the entirety of the game. As you can see, it's text-based. So if you zoom in here, You'll see a hex designation, 6143, so you know exactly where you are. But we can also use, actually, let's maybe remove the weather, and now we get a better idea. I mean, the map is not bad. It looks good, I think. Anyway, so yeah, we can see a little bit better here what we have to work with. So that we have two of the Japanese air bases down here. Wake itself, which is what they're trying to take, is up here. And that's green. That's U.S. We're trying to help them out, basically, to reinforce and repel the Japanese. Yeah, you already saw here, there's an option. There are more options here. We can turn things off and on. But let's take a look at the victory conditions, right, before we do anything else. That's this one over here. So current score, U.S. strategic victory. Right now we're winning. Well, why are we winning? Well, because we have 20 victory points. We control Wake by default. The Japanese are nowhere to be found right now. We haven't sunk any ships or destroyed any planes, so there is that. We can look and get more information here, details. That's a good thing, I think, to do before you start playing, to take a look at this here, because I didn't know what it was about in detail until I saw this, right? So to win, a side must score at least 20 points and more points than its opponent. Okay. The level of victory depends on the ratio of points. So if we have 2-1, strategic victory, and we have 2-1, right? If they had, let's say they had 1 point and we had 20, that would be 20-1. If it's 1.25 and more, then it's a tactical victory. And then if it's a 1-1, it's a draw. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. You get a lot of points from carriers, actually. It depends on the hangar capacity of each carrier, how many points you get. And we can look at that when we look at our carriers. You get half the victory points for a carrier on fire or a heavily damaged carrier. And this is important to know, actually. A carrier is heavily damaged when she has lost half of her hit points, or she has lost her propulsion, can't move, or she has lost all her elevators, which, tell me if I'm wrong, is that what they're using to move the planes up to the flight deck? I'm guessing, right? Or her flight deck has been destroyed. Yeah, that makes sense. You lose half of that then. Each plane, I think what they mean by that, each counter is worth a quarter point. Because in the game, you'll see the counters. Each counter, I think, represents 4 planes, but I think it's each counter there that is worth a quarter. Battleships are worth 6 points if you sink them, 3 points if they're on fire or heavily damaged, like this. The surface ship is heavily damaged. Oh, no, wait, here. Yeah, that's special rule for surface ships. Yeah, she has lost half her hit points or propulsion or half of the main turrets. Okay, and then we'll drag down here. Heavy cruisers, you get 3 points for each CA heavy cruiser, 1 point for each CA under fire or on fire or heavily damaged. Light cruiser, 2 points and 1 point. Destroyer, 1 point for each destroyer. Transports give you 2 points if you sink it, 1 if it's on fire or heavily damaged. So you can see here, the destroyers don't give you very much. You have to actually sink them. If they're on fire, no points. And then control of wake. And listen to this here. You get 20 points, right? But they must also, the Japanese, unload at least 10 cargo points in order to capture it. We can see that here. 0 out of 10. Nothing offloaded. But also, look at this here. Each point of cargo unloaded by the defending side, well, that would be us, the U.S., increases the capture threshold by 1. So if we offload cargo, and we have some cargo in a transport fleet, if we offload 5 cargo, then they have to take 15 to take control, right? So we'll see how that goes. But let's say they take control of the island and we don't lose any ships on either side, then they would win pretty easily. But, I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, right? Okay, so that's the victory points. I think we looked at everything here, right? And losses will show up here later. Okay, now let's go back to the map here. And in this game, by the way, it is important to right-click sometimes. They have some really good contextual help here. Shall we dive into what we're looking here on the map? I think we should. So you know we have an airfield here. This is Wake Island itself. But we have our task force over here. I think we should jump into them first, maybe. Yeah, so we can just go to the map. We can zoom in. We can see here, Task Group 14.1. There's a pictorial representation. Looks like a transport ship there. And then over here, we have, it looks like a, I don't know, it's that, yeah, that looks like probably as a carrier, right? It is a carrier task force, but the picture itself, I mean, task force 14 is here. And then further down, if you drag it down, we can see the hangar task force 11, right? Another way to get to that information here is if you click on the actual symbol, it will cycle through. Okay, so let's jump into Task Force 14. We can do that by clicking on it, and then we get an idea of what we have in that task force. In this case, we have, well, let's look here. That you can, if you played any kind of board game, old school war game, you'll recognize these, right? So anyway, this is a CV, that would be aircraft carrier. We have a couple of heavy cruisers as well, 1, 2, 1 light, and then 4 destroyers here. And the CV, the aircraft carrier, we can actually jump into that, the Saratoga, and see it in more detail. On the other ones, we cannot. This is the information we have here. And to get information about it, they have an actually pretty good manual, but let's jump into the CV and take a look itself. So we're here on the actual screen for the carrier, and it looks a little bit intimidating, but I'll explain how it works. At the bottom, we can see all of the assets we have that can contain planes, basically. We have two carrier groups here, Task Force 14 and 11, and then we have also Wake. It says Wake underneath there, right? We're looking right now at the Saratoga in its task force, and we're looking at the ship itself. So this is what we have down in the hangar down here, and you can see the planes we have here, and this is where you want to use your right mouse button if you have it, or long press if you're on a mobile device. So we can take a look and see what we have, and I'm not super familiar with the actual designation of the planes, but we can look at that in the manual in a second. Looks like we have a couple of F4s here, these planes, and if you right click, you'll get information about what it means, each counter here, which is very useful actually. So it says right here, each counter stands for 4 planes, as we can see, and then we have 4 counters. So we have 16 planes on this ship that are of type F4s. And the fact that there's a little square or rectangle in the bottom corner here means it can operate on carriers. Some planes cannot. They have to be like land-based. But this one can be. It's blue. And then the numbers at the top here, we have some air-to-air capability. We can take on other planes. It's a value of 2. The second number is an air-to-ground. We can do ground attack, but we don't have any bombs. We can strafe only. And I think that impacts what we can do as far as damage to buildings, if I'm not mistaken. There is a pretty good manual, like I said. We can look it up. Anyway, and then below that, the 3 means the ruggedness, ability to sustain damage. I think that means basically like hit points. And then at the bottom again, here, we can see 13 inside the blue. That means that we have 13 endurance. That's how far we can fly. And don't forget, when we fly, we want to come back. So you really want to cut it in half, unless you are transferring your plane somewhere else. Anyway, this is a a fighter plane. You can tell that by the fact that it has the primary value here is the 2, right? Also, the symbol, I think, how it's located on there indicates that it's a fighter. We have another fighter here, an F2, which I think is an older model, right? So it only has 1 in air-to-air combat, and the ruggedness is, or the not ruggedness, ruggedness, hit points, is 2 instead of 3. Not nearly as good. Slightly better range, though. And we have more of them on the ship. And then to the right, we have a dive bomber. The dive bomber, if we right-click on that, we can see, the symbol kind of shows a plane going down to the right? So it has a longer range, can operate on the carrier, obviously. It has a decent air-to-air factor, though. 2 is not bad, right? And then air-to-ground, 1, and it can do bombing. And then finally air-to-sea, taking on naval targets, also pretty good at that. Ruggedness is lower than our F4, same as our F2s. And then endurance is greater. It all depends what you're doing with the planes. It depends on the action you're taking. And then finally we have a, this is a torpedo bomber, I believe. Yeah, torpedo bomber. If you right-click on that, carrying torpedoes, I think the symbol right underneath there shows torpedo. Anyway, again, 4 planes, can operate on the carriers. It has 1 air-to-sea factor. Nothing for air-to-air combat. So, something that is not a fighter, by the way, cannot act as an escort. They will be, when you send them out to do strikes, it's going to be trying to bomb or strafe. So even though, I believe this is how it works, that even though the, which one is it, the Dauntless maybe? Even though this dive bomber has a pretty good air-to-air combat, because it is not a fighter, It's a fighter bomber? Dive bomber, sorry. It's a dive bomber. That means its role is not going to be to escort, right? At least that's, I think, how it works. Anyway, the ruggedness here in this one, torpedo bomber, is 1, range of 12. Okay, and it costs, you can see here, 1 movement point is spent per phase aloft or 2 points per hexes. So we'll look at that later. Anyway, so we're on the hangar here. We can have 22 planes. We have 20. And you can rebase them to this ship if you want to, or away from it. Now, remember what you said about the victory points? We can go back in here. This is Saratoga, by the way. We can go back in here, and it says right here, the reward for each sunk carrier is hangar capacity. So, in our case, this is Saratoga. In our case, 22 victory points. We don't want to lose Saratoga or be on fire or all that bad stuff, right? So we're going to be taking, be careful here. Anyway, so we have the planes here. I'll just give you a quick overview, and then we'll jump out and take a look at how the turn works. It's a turn-based game, obviously. Anyway, so we're in a hangar. What you do in the game is that you allocate your planes to different actions, like search or cap. Cap being a combat air patrol. Anyway, they're protecting the carrier itself, or you can send them away to protect another carrier or another fleet if you want, a task force, if they have enough range, or they can go on strike. They can be sent on a strike or rebased. That's what we do over here as well. And if you want to, you can put them on the deck on the runway and be ready to take off, have them kind of on standby. So that's the main thing we can do here. And we can easily switch over to our other one. Here's Lexington. Looks very similar, right? Has 17 on board. Similar planes, not exactly the same. No F-Force here. And then Wake. Wake is a little bit different, but the same boxes apply here, right? Has a hangar. It has what? This one here, right click, let's see. Air-to-air combat. Yep, it's a plane pointing north, up. So it's a fighter. It's an F-4. And we have 3 of them, so 12 planes total. And the same numbers apply. And you can see here, by the way, we have a limited fuel supply. Every time we launch a unit, we burn fuel. So we're going to be running low. So it'd be good to get that fleet we talked about, that task group, with extra supply. If we can reinforce Wake, be helpful, right? Anyway, let's jump back out now and look at the game, because I remember I didn't actually tell you how the game works. The game is set up. If we click on here, that's historical notes. That's not what I wanted. We can hover over this here. Basically, the game revolves around turns. A turn is 1 hour and 20 minutes, as you can see there, during the day at least. And then each turn is divided up into phases. Phases are meant for planes, so 20 minutes at a time, right? But ships move in turns, so that's kind of how they divide it up. And the day starts at 4 o'clock in the morning. You can start preparing for your actions you want to take. And then it goes forward by 20 minutes at a time in a phase. You can go faster if you want. At 5:20, an hour and 20 minutes later, you can start your air operations. So you can designate your planes earlier at 4 o'clock in the morning, but they won't take off until it's 5:20, right? So that's how it works. And I think later in the evening there, yeah, we can see here, it goes on till 8 o'clock. Once it hits 8, it's dark. You don't want to be messing around with your planes in the dark. If they come in to land in the dark, bad things can happen. What you want to do, probably, you can move your fleet under cover of darkness. You can have surface combat in during the night. I think you can invade in the night and so forth, but planes cannot take part, as far as I understand it. Anyway, that's the game, right? So right now we're sitting at 4 o'clock, day 1. Remember, it's 3 days here, so it's day 1 now. But I want to show you the manual here. So here are the basic rules. You can get a very quick idea of how things work. The same information we found before, but pretty detailed. You can see the arrow pointing here. Is a level bomber, kind of points to this way. Is a strategic bomber if it's in green, I mean, I think I have a pretty good idea of how it works, mostly. What did I show you? I showed you these, right? Yeah, I did. And a dive bomber here. We didn't have a level bomber, I don't think. Torpedo bomber here. Yeah, we had one of those. No strategic bomber. And they all have different stats. We can get into that a little bit later, how it works. But there is another aspect to the game, and that is these here. If you remember, we had the blue ones here with a blue rectangle. That means they can operate off of carriers. Well, there are white and orange as well. Those are seaplanes. So They can be launched for something like a heavy cruiser, or from land-based, like the big ones, the white ones are launched from land-based operations, but they're managed by the program. Now, I believe there is a DLC. You can buy DLCs, at least for the PC, where you can expand the game and take control of those, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so the bigger ones are the white ones here, and the smaller ones are the yellow, orange ones. So they're going to be launched automatically, taken care of by the program. We'll see them come out though. We might see them, flying around, whatever. Okay, so anyway, I was talking about the air units and the rules. So we can go down here, and they explain the basics here. If we go down, torpedo bombs, crops, yeah, okay, that. And then we'll go to the air units inventory. Here's where I would go and say, if you don't know a plane, you can go down here, and it's alphabetical order here by the name here. So let's say we go down to F4. What name was it actually assigned? F4, this one. So we had, I think, the Wildcat. So we had the Wildcat, and we had the Buffalo. So the Buffalo is not as good as the Wildcat. And we had the other one. I think it's the Dauntless, because I looked it up before, obviously. Which one was it? No, this one, yeah. Yeah, the Dauntless is the one we had, the dive bomber. Depending on, it can actually do cap here. It can do cap, but if it does, it's not as effective, as you can see by the parentheses. So we saw it as in its primary role as, a dive bomber, but it has other options you can put it at as well. And then we had this one, I think it was, Devastator. I think that's the one, yeah, I think so. So anyway, that's what we have right now. There's quite a few planes here. If we go down to, yeah, they talk about endurance and ammunition. We don't have to go into all this now. And the airfields, we can look at those later. And the same thing with the ships and the forces here. They talk about the ships. Well, I'll show you how that works. It's pretty cool in the game. But there's also advanced here. Now, this is where I get into the details, the nitty-gritty. If you look at the different options here, there's a lot of information. Let's see here. If we go to you can see how everything works. It's pretty much laid out here. This is a pretty deep game. If I go back now, though, and go to the air search, I want to share this here. Yeah, even the formula to find somebody when you're searching, right? So there's a lot to this game. I'm not pretending I know all this stuff, but I know enough to be dangerous here, right? Okay, anyway, how are we doing on time? Decent. Haven't even started yet. Okay, but it's a good game, I promise. Anyway, so what are we doing now? 4 o'clock in the morning. We have wake. We're worried about the Japanese. They're going to come, and they're going to be putting units ashore here, I think, right? So we may want to take a look at wake itself. The wake itself, if I right-click on it, we can see here, it's a pretty small one. It has one runway. Here, you can see the one there, one runway. That means we can have any plane except strategic bombers placed here. Okay, we have 5 hit points there, and here's the interesting part: AA value, not just interesting, but it's pretty interesting. The leftmost number is heavy anti-aircraft fire you can put out, and the rightmost is light. The difference is you fire heavy anti-aircraft fire before the enemy planes get to attack you. Once they're done attacking and they are leaving, then you fire light. So it's always better to have a lot of heavy aircraft fire. And then coastal defense here as well. That can fire on a fleet that is in the same hex, I believe. And if you ever wonder, you can go here to the advanced. I'm on advanced. You can go here and you can find it here. There's a lot here. But let's not get into all of that yet. Okay, so there's Wake. And if you look at Wake, we only have 12 planes, I guess. Here, the F-Force, the Wildcat, we have those. They can have cap missions. I feel it's okay. They can do some damage, but you can't really rely on what amounts to 12 planes to defend this island. I think we should be ready to maybe send in our fleet, our task forces there. So let's go back out here. It looks to me, if you remember from the notes, that we have a reinforcement here. It looks like a transport here to me, right? Yep, it's a transport here. This is a transport, and there is a seaplane option here. If you have a DLC, you can have a special thing you can do to create a floating seaplane base. But anyway, as you can see in blue here, this blue number, That is how much supply we have, which includes units and fuel and things like that. Our destroyers, the DDs over here, also have a little bit of that, right? So we have 9. Remember, they had to put ashore at least 10, the Japanese. If we put 9 on top, they have to put in 19 to be able to take over Wake. And if they don't do that, they got to sink enough of our units to account for taking, for the difference, right? So if you look at the fleet we have here, so this is the fleet that is on its way quite much, it's much closer than our Task Force 14 over here. We can turn on the distance range finder here if you want. Select that one there. And as you can see now, let me remove the hexes. There. Now we can see the distance. So from here to there, it looks like 17 hexes. Well, that's obviously important because of the range of our planes. So we should keep that in mind when we are sending something from way over here, 26 hexes away. It's going to be too far, I think. We can't do much about that. Anyway, we have the ships, right? We have a whole bunch of destroyers. Are they any good? Not really, it looks like to me. And I'm looking at them here to think, what I'm thinking about is we're going to be maybe attacked here, potentially as we get closer. We're going to be attacked by planes. So what are they going to do? They're going to use their light and heavy anti-aircraft fire. I guess they're not terrible. Actually, they are not bad for a destroyer, I think. 2 is pretty good. So 2 attacks there, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then these 3 are not as good, right? But I think that's because they are carrying supplies, troops. They can't fire as many guns. But other than that, 1 hit point there. Okay, yeah, and if we're wondering what that is, we can look here. Life points, hit points is there. This is damage control. Can they repair? Basically, I believe. Anti-aircraft there. Loaded cargo is 1. Yep, and surface combat factors there. So if we do run into somebody with a fleet, this number is what we're going to use. So there's that. The actual transport has a little bit of light AA, anti-aircraft, but nothing much, right? So there's that. And if they run full steam here, and we run into something, I don't know if they're going to make it. Let's compare that to our task force under the command of Saratoga here. If you remember these, they have like 2, 3, so 2 heavy, 3 light, 1, 3. This one, well, they're a little bit different, right? The aircraft carrier itself has 3 heavy and 9 light, not bad. 4 hit points, damage control 3, so they can repair. If we take in water, we can do something about that. We get a fire, I think we can do something. We have 2 heavy cruisers. Not always better. Because here's what I'm thinking. If you compare the 2 the 2 heavy cruisers with the light cruiser, look at the difference here. These have this orange box. That means they have a seaplane. We don't control it, but they can send them up. That's good. The surface combat power is 8. That's good compared to the light cruiser, right? That's only 5. But look at the heavy anti-aircraft fire. 2 versus 8. I'd say the light cruiser is a floating anti-aircraft platform. Really quite good. This one especially. And there is a good destroyer here, the Selfridge. Look at this one, 4-4. It is by far our best one. The other ones are not bad, but this one is not bad at all. And then we get 4 light anti-air here. They also have this is search radar. And that means we're going to use this when we are hunting down enemies, basically, to see if there is any planes in the vicinity. Let's see if I can find it here. If I go to the rules, air search, is it in here? Not 100% sure. Bear with me for a second. That's the formula. That's how you do searches in general. Here. This is what we're talking about. Detection of scouts. So when you're trying to detect with your fleet if there is a plane there, well, you roll a d10, so a 10-sided die, this one over here. And if you roll 6 or more, so you have 40% chance, you will detect it. If you have cap above the task force, if you send up like the Wildcats, the F-Force, then we get +1. You have 50% chance then. If at least a U.S. carrier is there with radar, you get +2. And you get +1 if at least a ship with air radar is there. I don't know if that's cumulative or not, but it looks like we're going to have 70% chance to detect an enemy spy plane, basically, or a scout, if we have cap and if we have a U.S. carrier with radar. And that blue dot is air radar. Now, if the weather is bad, we haven't talked about weather, then we're dropping down -2, rain -3, and storms -4. And if they're already here, then we get a +1. But you know what? It's not going to be. It may look here like, oh, it's great to have bad weather if you are trying to find somebody, but there are other advantages in combat, in battle, by not having bad weather. So we're not going to find them as easy, but they're not going to find us as easy either if the weather is bad. So we can go, actually, that might be worthwhile looking at the weather here. There's overcast, rain, and light storm. We can show that on the map. Clouds are moving 1 hex every 2 turns, and a turn is an hour and 20 minutes. 75% chance in the wind direction, shown on the cloud, and 25% random. And every 12 hours it will change. So there's that. And then the chance of detection of task forces or approaching airstrikes are reduced. Radar is not affected. So -50% chance that a scout coming in, that they're going to be able to detect us, right? And 65 for rain and 80 for a storm. And then we have more information here. Yeah, heavy AA, hit chances reduced by 3%. There's a lot to the game, right? So we can just jump out of that for now. And we'll go back here. Okay, so yeah, what we're going to do here, we'll remove that. We'll take a look at the weather. So you can see here, if I right click, it says here, overcast, wind westerly. I think it's blowing. I think that means it's blowing west, meaning it's blowing here. 75% chance going to go this way. And I think, let me jump back in. It said, if you go down, oh, wait, here. It's changing direction every 12 hours. It moves 1 hex every 2 turns. So there's that. So we may want to, if the weather's moving this way, west, yeah, it's going to help us with our CV here, kind of on the cover, getting in there, right? So what I wanted to do was, I wanted to look at this situation here, compare the distance. Maybe, here's what I'm thinking. Let me know what you think. We're looking at this strike force here, or this carrier fleet, the Saratoga. We have planes on here, like we have these, the dive bombers, the Dauntless, and which I forget the name, the Devastator. Maybe rebase some of these, because if we were to do this now, we move them in here, into the deck, the runway, we can turn them over and we can say transfer. Now the range goes up. No combat power, but range 24. I don't think that will do though. If I'm correct, and we can check that out here, we'll turn on the distance marker. There. 24, we have 26. We can try it. The problem is you go beyond the range, you have a greater chance of crashing, so you don't want to mess around with that. Maybe we'll move west a little bit, then send them over to Wake, and operating off of Wake I feel is better. The problem with Wake, unlike a carrier, limited supply. Remember that? Yeah, that barrel that we saw. So if they're on the aircraft carrier, no problem with supply. So there's that. I'm thinking about doing that here. Down here, we have 2 Japanese bases. We can't see much about them except there's one runway here. It has, I think this is hit points, and that is coastal defense. I'm right-clicking. Yep, coastal defense. So if you get too close, they're going to fire on you. And then this one over here is definitely bigger, right? And we said something about that in our, was it in the instructions? Because this is the victory conditions, right? We can see transport gives us points. If we go to the victory here, oh, no, wait. Where was it we were talking about that? Oh, I think it was in the historical notes here. Right. So we said something about we were to raid the Marshall Islands as a diversion. Okay, that's what we're doing there, right? We're going to raid over here. So we're going to send this one west. Let's take a look at this one here. This is Task Force 11. And what do we have here in the hangar? Well, we could do, here's what I'm thinking. I don't think we need to have cap right away. So that close air support. Is it combat air patrol or close? I think it's close air support here. But anyway, that would be supporting the fleet itself. We don't need to do that yet. We only have 5 of them. So let's wait with that. What we could do is we could send out one of these here to do a little scouting mission Let's maybe do that, and I'll show you how it works here with a search. So we'll take one. These controls here show you how many you're going to move at a time when you drag them over. And it's one at a time here. We'll take one of these dauntless, move them up here. And it says in 80 minutes, you'll be ready to take off and start searching. It's going to search 20 hexes all the way around it, 360. If you click on that, we can change the pattern. This indicates the pattern is going to be searching all the way around. So instead of doing that, because that limits the chance, remember that formula in the rules? The very complicated formula? Well, it depends on your angle, your arc. And right now we have a complete 360 degrees. But we're coming in from the east, so we want to look to the west, I think. If we go something like that, so we're going to look at this direction. And 20, well, that's the max they're going to do. If I say 20 here, it's fine. This one here, if I were to check and see, if we put them here, we can see that if we have drop tank 16, scout 20. So scout is 20. Once it goes out there as a scout, which we're doing here, one unit, as you can see, that X1, it has a range of 20. So 20 is the max it's going to do. All right, so we have one now. We're sending out, I think I'm going to send out 2 here. We'll do that. So now anything we put in here is going to have the same formation, 20 hexes, 120 degrees. Let's just do that. We'll wait with cap until later, right? So let's do that. So I think that's good for now. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. They can't take off till 5:20 anyway. We'll go back to the Saratoga. Now, the Saratoga is, this one here is the Lexington, but Saratoga is up here. Now, what I was thinking about, what we could do, we could let them kind of slow down, get closer with our carrier, and then have our F-4s. Do we have F-4s on here? I think we do. Yeah. We could let them act as escorts or a close air support above the transport, because the transport's going to be important, but I don't know if we want to do that. That slows the whole thing down, and by the time we get to wake, well, things might have gotten out of hand, right? So right now we have an automatic movement here, autopilot, as you can see, all the way to wake, which might be good. It's wide open here. It's clear. There's no clouds at all, and I want a clouds, but I can't really wait for that, right? Yeah. Okay. So this one here, I have to wait a little bit longer before we get close. But I mean, you have to get closer. If we get a little bit closer, we can fly our planes over here and base them out of wake, and then maybe send them back and meet here if we need to. I don't know. So what we do now, let's say this is good. We're going to be moving west here, and down here we're sending up a few planes, 8, 2 counters, to take and look to the west. Let's do that. We can press this here. Then we move forward in time by a phase, 20 minutes. So it's going to say 420 here, day 1. Or we can right click and we can leap forward in time. So if you really want to play quick, you can do that. But we're going to say forward. So now 420. If there was something happening, well, here's an event. There's nothing really happening. Yeah. There's nothing there. Nothing happened yet. Why did it not happen? We gave them orders to do something on the Lexington. Well, 60 minutes ago now. They just have to spend it till 5:20 before they can do anything. It's a factor of getting ready, and they can't take off until, the light is good. So we'll go back out here. And if you want to get to your different CVs, aircraft carriers, you just click on this one. We'll go next turn. And we know nothing has happened there. This 2 here indicates 2 of our ships can move. The movement is a little bit weird. Yeah, a little bit weird as far as fleets. Remember, they can only move once per turn, and there are 4 faces per turn. We've done 2 now. You can see lighter gray here. So that's why we can move 2 of them now. But it's blue. I think that means, 2. We can move 2 now. But we don't have to worry about it. They're on automatic by this yellow. You can see that. So we don't have to worry about that. It's going to be automatic. 1 more. Now 3 can move. And then we're going to get to the end of the turn. Now it is daytime. Okay? But it is 5:20 exactly. If we go into the Lexington and check it out, we can see here 0 minutes. They're about ready to take off. And now when I go forward in time, I don't think anything happened. Nope, there's no information here. There. Now something happened. We can see here we have a blue pattern. That is kind of similar to what we saw, right? They're now in the air, moving forward, and they're going to move, what did we say, 20 in range? And then they have to come back, so 10 is what they're going to move. If we go here, I mean, not the hexes, actually here. They're going to move all the way out to, yeah, here, thereabouts, and come back, right? The ship won't move that fast, right? So we can go a little bit forward now. And you can see them coming out. A little bit hard to see with the weather, but yeah, there it is. So we don't see anything here. It's not guaranteed. If you want to know how it works, yeah, this is the formula. But basically, it means that the farther away you are, the distance is less chance. The greater the arc is, the less chance it is. The more ships there are in the enemy fleet you're trying to detect, which we don't know if there is any, the greater the chance you're doing it. The weather, look at the weather here. This is important. If it is a storm, you have a 20% chance compared to otherwise. So it's a big modifier, you know? So anyway, if we go back now, we can see here, we go one more turn forward. 3 of them can move here now. They're going to move automatically. They're yellow. I think if I go here, yeah. This number displayed in yellow for task force on autopilot, and they're on autopilot, so that's fine. Okay, now we go a little bit forward. So now we're out here. 10, they're going to start turning around and coming back home. And we can see that, well, I'm playing a little bit fast, actually. Yeah, we're moving in here. I have to be a little bit careful. This arrow shows where we're going to move next, right? It's automatic now, and I'm going to take control manually later, but let's go forward one time. Here, this is the maximum we have. There's an instruction there are rules in the rule book that explains what happens. They're turning around so they get a 360 view. You can see 3 of them here. Haven't seen anything. There may not be anything. We don't know. Okay, but anyway, so we reached the maximum point now. We'll return, and there's good now. Now, I'm getting a little bit worried, I must say, because we're getting closer. What if there's some Japanese here? I'm thinking like this. We have quite a few. No, we don't. I was going to say, we have our F4s, Wildcats. But we don't. We only have the F2s. But here's what we should do maybe. Remember the modifier? To detect if there's somebody scouting us, it goes up if you have at least one counter, 4 planes up. We can go ahead and tell them here, get ready, put yourself on cap, right? And in 40 minutes, they're going to be ready. And then they're going to be on cap. And every round that they're on cap, I believe they spend 1 of their movement points. So they're just circling, right? But they're taking 1 movement point off. And eventually they have to go back down on land, refuel, come back up, if you automate that. So we can circle them up here and out. We can have like 1 at a time, stagger them is what I'm trying to say, right? And that might help us detect. And it will also help us if they do an attack on our fleet. We haven't seen that, but we will. But I think that's going to have to be next time. Yeah, no, we got very far into the game. Not really. But this is the way I play it. So hopefully you like it. Come back. We'll play more. And we'll see if we can help out with Wake Island here next time, I guess.